Hey, Jens, how's it going?
Good. You know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I kind of do. It says alternative camera brands.
Right.
I think we're going to be announcing our camera later, but we're going to save that to the end of the show.
Right.
All right, so Phil, are you there?
Yeah, I look forward to you bringing out your camera and then loads of other companies making rigs for it because that will be funny.
I'm fine with that, as long as I sell cameras. What do I care?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
let's
don't
talk.
know.
Let's talk about some of these cameras we're going to talk about. I mean,
Well, you want to define it, let's say. So it's
Yeah, what is it?
what is an
Yeah.
What is an
alternate
independent?
camera?
yeah. I mean, there are obviously all the cameras, the mainstream cameras like Canon and Sony and all those that have been around for a long time. The alternate cameras would probably be the ones that the names that you haven't heard of, the ones that are far and few between.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
call them indie cams.
Okay.
It's like a company like us, and we'll be talking about our camera, but like a company like us that decides, hey, let's make a camera. I mean, the first one I can think of is like what L did with that digital Bolex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
that was definitely that was great. That I never expected that to come out. I still got it, and it was different. It wasn't better.
Yeah.
It was different, and I think that is a big aspect of it. It's trying to stand out. Nobody's making Super 16 digital cameras, were they? And
Right.
still aren't.
No, the cool
I think
thing-
there was an iconoscope. So it was like a little thing. It was a really cool camera. But that was the true one off.
Well, what about that Harazumi camera that we used when we all went to that wedding thing? I liked
Well,
that
that's a
camera.
toy camera. That was a toy camera, though. That's different.
But the cool thing about
These
a
are
lot of
these are,
these
these are
alternate
professionals. Yeah.
about a lot of these cameras is that a lot of them you kind of almost know they're not going to make it, but they push things and they make people aware of trends and things, and maybe some of the established camera companies will adopt some of that.
Well, maybe they will make. What are we saying? The first of these camera companies was Red. They weren't
Yeah.
Canon or Sony
True.
or Panasonic or JVC.
Right,
Those
so-
were the camera companies we grew up with.
I guess at that time you could have considered it an alternate camera,
yeah.
to the the Panavisions and what else was out there, Dalsa at the time, which died
Oh
off.
yeah, no, and the Weiss cam. There were other cameras now that
Yeah.
we're thinking about it.
And that definitely wasn't your one then.
No, because it failed.
I thought that was yours. When I first heard
Yeah.
about it, I went, huh?
All right, so what are we
No, I
defining?
just consulted on it and then I walked away.
What are we defining alternate cameras now? Which ones are they?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. But I mean, so basically what you're talking about is what is a small camera company and what are the advantages really does a small camera company have? They can take risks that a big camera company might not be able to. What do you think,
Yeah.
Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few of them here. So I've got the Kinefinity Marvo LF behind me, which I'll get onto in a second. But that is a beast of a camera. But I think what really sums up these companies could be done with, where is it here? This camera here. So this is the, you would call it Z-Cam. I call it Z-Cam. So this is their E2. I can get it in focus. There we go.
I got one here too. In our
It'll get it
cage.
in focus. Anyway, I've got the I've got the Super 35 one here, the S6, and I've got the E2. So this costs $2,000, and it's got a Micro Four Thirds sensor, the same sort of size as the Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera, and it records in ProRes, and it internally or externally using a USB-C drive. But the really cool thing is, join the Facebook group. The main guy there, Kinson, is on there, and so you find you want a feature on here. You'll tap it out and you say, what would be really cool is if it could do this. And he goes, okay, I'll put it in new firmware. That is amazing. So I'm actually using my Sony FX9 as a web camera right now. And it's a beast of a camera. But I have a long list of things that I would like to be fixed, improved upon. I've given them, and I don't expect many, if any, to be implemented. But because these are such small companies, you've got a direct feed to the actual manufacturer. And that's great. And they really are pushing the boundaries because this, I don't even know what the latest specs are because they change it every day. But it was 120 frames per second 4K when I got it. And I think it's now up to 175, which is amazing for such a small camera. And it's that whole kind of concept of the red. It's just a little cube and you just build it up to what you want it to be. That's for me, is one of the nicest things about these independent cameras.
I mean, I often said that the original Kinefinity, or maybe the second version Kinefinity, was the best design camera I ever saw ergonomically, because those little cubes are kind of a bitch to get them on. I mean, we're shoulder people, so to get that thing on your shoulder and balanced, you kind of really got to push it back there. Remember that first camera he made was about yay long. Mm-hmm. It was not tall. This tallness, like the red camera or the C300 is just going to make it wobble and stuff. He had a very low and long, and that to me is the best design. What do you think?
It looks like he kept it low. It's just shorter now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is this is the LF, which is their full frame camera, and it is a cube, but you just need to put on a few bits just to get it to go on your shoulder, and nothing major. And I've always liked that concept of just adding what you need. So if you do want to put on a gimbal, you can. I can put my FX9 on a gimbal, but it needs to be a very big gimbal, and it's a weight. I can't break it down. Whereas this I can have literally just as this bit here, which is tiny, which weighs less than a kilogram. I don't know what that is in your money. But you can build it up, with a rig, and get yourself a nice, decent EVF, and you've got a really powerful camera you can put on your shoulder for handheld. And I like that.
I mean, personally, I would say use the cube. I mean, there's tons of these little cube cameras if you're doing, Mauve Cam or something like that, and then this more of a substantial size, and this is just me, would be for your shoulder. You have like 1,000 cameras. Most people have 3. So you can have one for these smaller things that you're doing. What is this set you're in? This is looks like you're in a store. Is this new?
No, this is my edit suite. The other lives we've done, I've been pointing the other direction with all the little fairy lights. But this is where I work most of the time for my editing. So it's
I like it.
Screen setup, and yeah, it's fun. There's a lot happening on here, and got loads of cameras spread out. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about one that goes in the shoulder. But most people aren't going to want to buy one camera anyway. And if you've got a one camera that it can do it all. I don't buy one camera, but most people will buy one camera.
I don't know.
And if it's a case of just if you can just take off, say we've got your rig here. I can't show it to you, but I take off the VCT base plate, the shoulder pad, and it's already made it a smaller camera. So I don't have that extra, whatever it is, 2.5 kilos of the base plate and the VCT plate. Drops the weight. Nice. And, if I want to go even smaller, I can do. And it's just, for not on the FX9, but on these. So it's the same concept. And I really love that idea of add-on bits for what you need. It can't be too fiddly, and it needs to work in every way. It needs to still work as a small cube, and it needs to work beautifully on the shoulder as well. So it requires not just the camera manufacturer, but obviously people like you to make those accessories. But these sort of cameras, this is the thing about, look, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera would be, and I think it is considered to be, an alternative brand.
Yeah,
they are a big company now, but it is technically an alternative camera company because it's not, they're known for their software, but their cameras are getting pretty good. But this starts off, this camera here, which is quite similar. Look at it, it's nothing, absolutely bare bones. But this in itself can record 4K. It can record ProRes. It can do, as I say, up to 100 and maybe 75 frames per second now. And it just keeps getting better. It has onboard media recording if you want it, using CFast cards. It can take an NPF battery, but when you put it on a rig, you can put on a V-mount, you can put on a cinema lens, you can put on adapters, you can add everything you want to it, and it's a really well thought through camera. And it actually has the best app I've ever seen. So whilst the controls are a little bit fiddly on here, if you just connect it via a USB or via Wi-Fi, your phone becomes the controller, and it's beautiful. It's like, this is what every manufacturer's app should be. It should be a replication of what your actual menus are like. But, well, maybe not the Sony menus because they're a bit confusing, but it's actually really very, very neat concept.
Okay. So let's talk about these cameras, because so now the digital Bolex is, it had its, day. That's not a camera viable now. The Red camera, that's obviously grown into a usable camera. They beat the system, which was hard to do. I mean, if you go back even in the 70s, there, JVC kind of ruled it for a while. Then Sharp had, Hitachi had some, Sony obviously did it. Panasonic took over at one point. Then Sony retook it back. There's always some camera company that's killing it, So,
Yeah.
so now Red came out, they bucked the system. Now we have this Z Cam, and there was a French or a Spanish company that had a camera, the Fran, right?
No, they didn't have a camera. They had a box.
They had a box.
They had
okay.
a box which, in theory, was supposed to be a VistaVision camera, and it's if people haven't seen my review, it's worth watching because it is literally torture. It was torture. I was troubleshooting with the guy, and he said you need to get a mouse. It was running Windows, and the interface was the worst I've ever seen. I couldn't record a single frame from it. And this is the other side. It's like, okay, you need to trust the manufacturers, because these guys were selling these cameras for 27,000 euros and saying it was shipping in 2 months. So based upon what I saw, they're taking deposits of 10%. From what I saw, this camera was years away, if ever, going to make it. And it didn't. They went bankrupt and it folded before I got the review out. So, I mean, that's the thing is, they've got to have a track record. Kinefinity have a track record because they've been making cameras for a while. I think the Marvo LF is maybe their 5th camera. And before that, they had the Marvo Super 35 and the Terra 4K, which is a really great camera. And they've been getting better and better and better with each one. And they're learning. And this has specs way higher than my FX9, way higher than the C500 Mark II. It doesn't do some things as well as these cameras, but it does other things better. So it is fascinating. I mean, just seeing how far they're actually able to push things out of these tiny little cameras. I think it's exciting to actually have this alternative stuff rather than the traditional cameras, because I love the FX9, but it still has the same frame rates as my FS7 from 2014. So it doesn't do anything over 4K 60p, for example. So that sort of thing is like disappointing. And, it's that big manufacturers can be a little bit conservative when it comes to features, and it can be a bit slow. And I think you have these young upstarts coming along, and they really do push things much harder.
So that's the advantage, I think, of these upstarts and these alternative cameras, is that they're pushing the envelope, like we said before, and might influence the big camera makers. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. The danger about these cameras is maybe serviceability,
going bankrupt.
Yeah, and then losing support after you've spent all that money.
Language barrier.
Yeah, all those, that's part of serviceability. And so with those two cameras you have there, the Z-Cam and that, what's your experience so far? Now, your experience might be different because you're well known to them and they want to service you better, but for the average guy, that could probably still be an issue. I remember the camera behind you, the Kinefinity. He's gone through. He kept coming out with new cameras as people were buying the old cameras, and it's like I almost.
It's the Black Magic model.
Needed to. So my advice has always been, if anybody emails me and says I'm thinking about getting this, a Kinefinity or whatever it is, I say you need to make sure that there's a dealer near where you live, at least in your country, who can service the camera. Because unless you've got that, then I wouldn't consider it, because you don't want to be sending it back to China for a service, because it's going to take months. So, I mean, there is a dealer who have been trained to, and they will have all the bits to repair the Kinefinity cameras. So, and I think there's like maybe 3 dealers in Europe now, maybe more. And there's one in Amsterdam and one in Germany and one here. And that gives you that security, knowing if it does go wrong, then you can at least have that. And Zcam represented by a number of dealers in the UK. I don't know of their ability to service, because I haven't looked into it that much. But I think as long as you have that, that was one of the things in the US is that I don't know what the situation is now, but for a long time there was no dealers in the US for Kinefinity, and there's lots of people very hungry and wanting the camera because it was cheap. But without having that service ability, I couldn't recommend anybody to do it because it's not that it's unreliable, but it's just a risk. And I wouldn't want people to come back and say to me, why did you tell me to buy this camera? It went wrong and it's gone back to China. I've not had it for 6 months.
Do they have a dealer system in the U.S. now?
I'm not sure. They didn't for a long time, and I'm not sure if there are any now.
Yes, I don't think it was on B&H.
Maybe somebody can look that up while we're talking. Yeah. But the other thing is the life of the
B&H
company.
wouldn't be the sort of right place though. Anyway, you don't want a big dealer. You want a small dealer who can actually service it, who actually knows the camera. You speak something, they know it off by heart. That's what you're after, not the big guys.
We're not talking B&H here.
Well, but the United States is kind of not the same as Europe anymore. It's like we have like superstores now, like B&H and Adorama, and the smaller businesses that are kind of, I don't know what I want to say.
You mean
here.
like Able?
Well, no, Able is
Able's more like that, I would say, definitely.
Yeah,
they're much smaller, so they've always been more focused on, shooting video and the more high end. So I would think that sort of company would be fine.
But in the U.S. here, a lot of people go to local places and then they want to buy from like a B&H, especially if you don't live in New York, to get out of paying taxes.
If it's a bigger company like Sony or Canon, they have repair centers and things like that.
Oh yeah,
too.
It's a totally different animal. Yeah, I mean,
so that's another advantage for those types of cameras. Right. The other thing is the life of the company. Will these Chinese companies survive and stay around? Not necessarily just because they're Chinese, but look at Fran, that Spanish one. They died off.
You're not
quick.
Heavily capitalized. That's the problem.
So that's the other sort of risk you're taking. Because once they're gone, then you don't really have service.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think when you're buying a camera from these camera manufacturers, they do tend to be cheaper than the big brand alternatives, and I think that's part of the thing that you are considering. It's like, okay, well, if I had the money, maybe I would buy a red VistaVision, but I don't have the money. I have $5,000. What can I get? All right, I'll get the E2. What happens if they go down? Well, go under. What happens if it goes wrong? Maybe I should get the VistaVision Red. Well, the different prices. So you're buying into that. That it's a slight gamble, but the company is actually relatively mature because they've been working in VR. So these cameras started off as VR cameras in big rigs, and then I think it was NAB 2 years ago they showed the E2, which was their first proper actual cinema camera. So they're not inexperienced. They know what they're doing. I had this conversation at the BSC show a couple of weeks ago, which is the British Society of Cinematographer show. It's the best show in the world, by the way, guys.
Of course.
Way better than anything else. No, it actually is. It's because it's so good. It's actually probably a bit like Cine Gear, to be honest with you. And it's great. But I was talking to this guy, and he couldn't decide between the Marvo and the FX9. And I asked him, so what is it that you shoot? And he said, I shoot broadcast documentaries. And I said, what about audio? He says, I often do it in camera myself. And I went, okay, get the Sony. Much better audio. This is a camera that, it's solid. It comes from a very good pedigree. And if anything does go wrong, you have the prime support and you can get another camera. Especially you can get a rental if you need to, whereas something like this, you may not be able to get a rental. So if you want to match up your cameras, if it does, you won't have any problems. So these are the things you need to consider. And so he decided he's going to get the FX9. That's not saying that this isn't a great camera. It's just for his use, it made more sense to go with the Sony.
So that's the takeaway for the show is partly budget and then how you use your camera, what your type of shooting is.
Yeah. I think we have a question. Rachel, do you have a question there?
We've got if we're ready to change topics, we've got a couple of different comments here.
Yeah,
I just
throw 'em
want
in
to
there.
throw out real quick, though, before I start that. Moses said, and this is absolutely true, we've had really good experiences with Zcam as well, that Zcam has an incredibly active and responsive Facebook group where the CEO and engineer are constantly present. They respond really quickly, and that's very true. They are definitely using Facebook as opposed to more traditional methods to make sure that they stay in touch with their customers. But I'm going to go back slightly to a comment from Nick Driftwood, who said it's all about having a decent EVF, which a lot of little cams haven't got on board.
Thank you.
Often great specs and functionality, but they tend to be missing critical features. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, sure, buy one. That's what I'm saying.
Well, unless you're looking at, I know Nick, and Nick's got the Panasonic S1H, which is a superb video camera off the shelf. You know, it has loads. It's got a great EVF built into it because it's a stills camera. But no video camera, proper video camera, as in interchangeable lens, large sensor, that I know of, comes with a built-in EVF. I mean, the FS5 had one, but it's terrible. You know, all the ones that have them are terrible. The FX9 doesn't really have one. It has a loop on it. So that's why you buy things like this. I have the Chameleon Pro on there. And you buy these, and they can work. You know, that's why I like buying the ones which work generically across different cameras. Because in the past, I bought one for the Red. I bought the Red Bomb, and I bought the Sony F55 one. Each was like 5,000 or 6,000 and only worked on that camera. Whereas these are great. You know, this is not a shooting as it is. You can't shoot with it like this. You do have the tiniest screen in the world on there, but it's designed to be built up. It doesn't have to be massive. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be massive at all. I mean, you can look at something like, it's not really an independent, but the Sigma FP, because they are a big company, but it's not really known for shooting, you know, video cameras. This is tiny. It doesn't have an EVF, but it has this loop, which is, it's okay, but the downside is you can't remove it without unscrewing it. But yeah, I understand his point totally, but it's literally, if you start off with this blank slate of the camera, you add on what you need for the type of stuff that you want. I don't want an EVF on this if I'm going to stick it on a gimbal. I don't need it.
Well, no.
It's just going to add weight. But I love EVFs. Like with the Sigma, I wish it had an EVF. It's the biggest thing it's missing is a nice EVF like you get with your stills cameras.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, he's right to a point, but he's also wrong to a point.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, we've got a question here from Alexander, which could lead into playing some of your clips that we've got, who wants a straight up comparison between the Zcam F6 and the Kinefinity Mevo LF. And I know we've got some video clips that might help get started on that.
All right, we'll roll the clip and then you can talk about them, Phil. As a matter of fact, let's roll the clip. First off, are we allowed to talk under the clip?
Right.
I think we are.
Yeah, yeah. So this is filmed with the Mevo LF. So this camera shoots, I think, in 6K full frame up to 75 frames a second, and much higher. I think some of these shots are like, I don't know, I have to check the specs, around 180, 200 in HD, and I think, I have to look. There's really high specs in there. He's comparing two different sensor sizes though. He's talking about the Kinefinity, the Zcam F6. The F6 is full frame. So actually, I haven't used any of their full frame cameras. The only one I've got that's 6K is Super 35. I haven't had a chance to see that one yet, which I'd love to. And they're also bringing out an 8K full frame one as well, which was really disruptive, bringing out something like that. I don't know, because I've not used the full frame Zcam yet. I do know that the other ones that they make are really good. I also know this is really good as well. But until I've actually used both, I don't know. But I've had this for over a year now, and it's been rock solid. And I've been shooting a feature documentary with it, and it's looking really good. I've shot a couple of commercials with it, a couple of corporates, and it has been absolutely wonderful. And the image has been great. And it was until recently the only full frame proper video camera I owned until the FX9 came along. So I think it's got. The interesting thing is, it's actually now more expensive. Well, I don't know if they dropped the price, but the FX9 came along and it's actually cheaper than this, because this is what we were talking about before. Is that these cameras come out and they're cheaper than the competition. And I think Sony have been really aggressive with the FX9's pricing to bring it down below everybody else, to really push it out there. So I don't know. I mean, once I've had a chance to shoot with the full frame Z cams, I'll be in a position to answer that question.
Wait, I wasn't clear on this. So you're saying that the FX9, that the Kinefinity is a little bit more expensive than the FX9?
A little bit. I don't know if the price has changed at all, but it's especially if you're going to add on some of the essential bits like the back, which gives you the XLRs and stuff like that. So I think that pushes it definitely over the price of the FX9. It does have higher specs. This shoots on standard, well, they're thinner SSDs straight into the camera. It shoots ProRes, highest quality of ProRes for all your frame rates. It shoots RAW. I think it's Cinema DNG RAW internally. So these things, which are great. So there is some expense, but these are cheap as chips compared to, say, the XQD cameras within this camera. I mean, it
sounds like the comparison should almost be with a Red. How they're different in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really shot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what is the price of the cheapest Red, not the Komodo. I don't know what the cheapest one is. Whatever the Scarlet is now, but that's Super 35, isn't it? So this is full frame. So you need to look at the cheapest full frame Red, which would be VistaVision type thing. Those aren't cheap.
Yeah,
but there's not many full frame cameras, video cameras out there. Or if you want to call them cinema cameras, you can do. For me, what I often see when people use the word cinema camera is they use it as an excuse for it to be missing certain things. So, you don't need autofocus because it's a cinema camera. Okay. We don't need great audio in it because it's a cinema camera. I'm like, okay.
What about autofocus?
Well, I love autofocus. I think it is very good, especially if you've got somebody who cannot sit still at all. It's great for certain things. I was out filming with this FX9 yesterday on the coast, and it blew my mind in the way in how it kept focus on some of my shots of people walking to the camera. But also, I would frame up on something, and it would know somehow that was what I wanted to be in focus. I don't know how. There was people moving in a small portion of the frame. Maybe it's looking at whatever's moving, but it was just rock solid.
Wow.
But there's times when I turn it off, and I have to turn it off because it maybe hasn't chosen what I want, and I want something like this. It's not perfect. It's great for certain things, especially interviews, and it's great for tracking subjects. But I would probably say I use it half the time right now, because the rest of the time I just want to be able to manually control it.
I mean, that's good since you don't have a proper DP on set, so the autofocus helps. And you're old and your vision is really bad, so that you really kind of need that autofocus.
I mean, Steve, look, I am shooting at 1.4. You tell me, you get me a focus puller who can do this because there's no rehearsals. I'm just moving crazily. No focus puller will be able to get it as pin sharp and perfect as this. Focus pullers are great for other stuff. For this sort of crazy random stuff, it actually works really, really well. I say it's not for everything, but this sort of innovation, this technology is there to help us. It's there to make things better. Red with their Komodo, it's specced as having phase detection autofocus. So I'd be fascinated to see how well that is. It's the first Red to have autofocus.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so realistically right now, as an indie camera, you got the Sigma, you got the Kinefinity, and you got the Z cam, as he would say.
Yep.
Well, do you consider any Blackmagics?
No, because I mean that's already. I'm going to kind of go with Red and Blackmagic as being a camera company now. They're in this business.
Sigma's not.
No, Sigma's new into the camera business. Yeah. So what about the Sigma camera? Let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah. So I like the Sigma camera. I think it's got a lot going for it. But it's also missing a lot right now. I think it's a good couple of firmware generations away from being something I could use regularly. The lack of EVF is a big thing. One of the biggest selling points of this camera, if we take off all this stuff, is its size. When you take away the size benefit and start adding loads of stuff up, you must ask yourself, well, what is the benefit of this? It is full frame, so full frame small camera like this is terrific. But it doesn't have things like a headphone jack. Oh, it's okay because it's a cinema camera. You know what I'm saying? You still need a headphone jack. But you can record raw cinema DNG onto this SSD. It is still uncompressed cinema DNG, so not very practical. But I think once they've I actually spoke to the owner of Sigma, Dave Sigma himself, at the BSE show. That's not his real name. He's a Japanese guy, and he's lovely. And I talked about the camera with him and things that I'd like to see. And I like that. So they are a small company. You think, as companies go, it's not a very, very big company. And when they brought out the camera, I was very surprised. And when I got it, I liked a lot about it. But at the price of £2,000, which can get you a Blackmagic, or if you want to go down a hybrid route, because this is a hybrid camera because it's stills and video, half and half, then you're looking at the Sonys and the Nikon Z6 and stuff, which are cheaper. So I think once they've got their firmware sorted, and maybe if they could bring out an EVF for it, which I think they can do because it does have this connector on the side, which in theory could have anything on it, I think it could be an interesting contender.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, we've got some good back and forth here about autofocus. I think the last post from Jonathan said someone needs to develop external autofocus tools for cameras that don't have autofocus, something like Cinetape with an integrated wireless focus controller.
I think, didn't Red Rack have something like that?
Well, many people have.
Yeah.
But then you need motors.
Autofocus or follow focus?
I think we're talking
Autofocus.
autofocus.
Yeah, I mean, you can get something for Leica M-mount lenses, which goes onto the Sonys and gives you autofocus. Because these are manual lenses. I don't know how it works, but it does it. So it is. I think in theory it is possible to have something like that, because the way autofocus works right now is it's using the sensor via contrast or phase detection. But I'm sure there is possibly a way of doing it in addition. But I think you may as well just wait, because so many cameras now are coming out with it. The C500 Mark II has terrific autofocus. Their highest end, Canon's highest end camera, the C700, has autofocus. So I think it's coming to most cameras. Maybe we'll even see, maybe even Arri might put it in there. Who knows? I don't know. Probably not. But it's a tool. Everything is a tool to help us. And
Right.
we'd be crazy to ignore anything that could help us just because it's like, oh, I'm not using that. And, the reason I didn't like autofocus for 28 years of my career was because it was crap. I only started liking it when it became really good.
Let's take a look at another clip here. All right, what are we looking at here?
So I think that's the Marvo LF. I think that's just up in Richmond near me. So just some test shots. I go out there and just get to know the camera better, get to know the colors. And what's really nice about this is there's nothing fancy color-wise, grading-wise. So it shoots log. And this is one of the things I like about the Kinefinity and actually the Zcam, is they're so much simpler than my Sony. And Sony has so many options and things you do with it. This just shoots log. That's it. Shoots log. And you just put on one of their LUTs, which is actually so similar to the Arri Alexa LUT. Bang, it looks like that. Skin tones are nice, colors are nice. It's a really lovely camera. It has loads of really lovely features that I like about it. You shoot slow motion, and they'll always, like the Blackmagics, it'll always have a separate audio file to go with your high frame rates, which the higher end cameras do not do. So it's things like that which I find really, really practical and really useful. And I think there's a lot about these cameras that the bigger manufacturers can learn from, definitely.
Let's take a look at the Zcam footage.
Same sort of stuff, same sort of place. Now you're going to say, "Oh, it's all slow motion." Look, to be honest with you, the amount of work that I do, my paid work is 99.5% maybe normal speed. The only reason I'm shooting slow motion in these is that I do love slow motion. I think it looks lovely. You just can't use it that much in real work because it takes too much time. But I wanted to see just how good this 4K crazy high. I think it's 120 frames per second. This is 4K 120 frames per second. And it's great. Yeah, there's the higher end camera. So right now, if you want 120 frames per second high frame rate on the Canon C500 Mark II, which has just come out and costs, what is it, 17, 18 grand? So I don't know. You crop into 16 mil, super 16 mil from your full frame. So it's a massive crop. This is 4K full sensor, 120 frames. You know, it's things like that which excite me about the camera. It's not that I'm going to use it that much, but I like to know that it is there if I need it.
I think we have a question for you, for Jens.
Sure. Oh, what's that?
I don't know.
We do have a question for Jens.
Wow.
I can't remember who said it. It's back in the chat, but they were asking how you decide which cameras are worth us making products for. Since there's seem to be new models all the time.
Well, yeah, there has to be enough of them in demand to warrant making the parts for it. Otherwise, I mean, we can't, afford to spend all the R&D and stocking stuff for a camera that might only sell, a few hundred of. It's just not economical.
But realistically, you could take any camera that's made now, in the past, or in the future, and stick it into our ecosystem, our VCT and our new ACT that's coming out. Now, the only thing that would be different, like with the Sigma camera, is, okay, you make a cage for it and then it fits in, but you can use it cageless.
I'm referring to the custom parts.
Yeah, right.
We have many parts that work for any camera.
Yeah.
That's a lot easier to figure out, but it's the custom parts like cages that we have to really take a look at the popularity of the camera.
It's the top plates, definitely, because these sort of cameras they're small and you do need mounting points on there. So top plates, cheese plates are really important, and they have to be custom because of the way. If you look at the top of a Z cam, you can't just put any old generic thing on here. Come on, because there we go.
Yeah.
So I need one that keeps these free, keeps this free, keeps that free. So you definitely, and then of course because it's so small, I could definitely do with it being down the sides here as well.
Don't you have one of our cages, Phil? Don't you have
for
one
the Z cam?
Yeah.
I didn't know you did one.
It works on the E2 as well as their flagship cameras. So, we took a chance on this company. There was enough buzz, a lot of popularity. We thought with it enough to spend money on developing specific parts for this, and it's modular. I can get into it with you later if you want.
Yeah, but it also show them the bottom.
Maybe you should do a review.
Yeah, right. It has this new ACT, which is our ARCA setup. That's very similar to the VCT, but you can just slide the cameras on and off of the VC or the ACT base plate and or any ARCA type plate that you have.
Well, that looks really nice.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we'll have to get you that. There's a bunch of interesting
you're
new
on my
parts.
list, Bloom, to get a full Zcam ACT setup right at the beginning of March. I just haven't told you yet. News to you, but you're on my list.
Mm-hmm.
I have two though, Rachel.
Just don't
wow.
ever
that's
expect
so
to see
sad.
that gear back.
Oh, wow, he has two. It's like one
sad.
isn't enough. All right, so this was an interesting show. We wanted to kind of talk about this sort of indie camera market. We'll announce more about our camera in the coming months, of course. It's going to be 16K.
Right around April 1st, we'll announce that.
Yeah,
right?
April 1st. It's going to be 16K camera. Actually, years ago, we were going to do a 64K camera, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only gone up from there.
Yeah, but they used too much, media to record it, so we opted out of it. So, Phil, thanks for joining us today.
Cheers, guys.
Good to see you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. This was a great chat today. A big thank you to iCan, who provide all of the lighting for our show, and to our sponsors, Canon, Rode Mics, and Kessler Crane. We will see everybody in a few weeks with a new show. Bye.